Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show, and welcome to the world of the Rolling Stones' 1973 classic, Goat's Head Soup. As you can see behind me, I have five different versions of that album. So in 1973, I was 10 years old, and I have an older sister, and I grew up listening to Sticky Fingers and Hot Rocks, which was the two Stones albums she had, and played them constantly. And then in 1973, when I was 10 years old, the Rolling Stones released this single, and this is the original copy of it from 1973, and this was the first single from their upcoming album, Goat's Head Soup, Angie. And I bought that, and of course Angie became a #1 hit, backed with Silver Train. And then when the album came out, and here it is, this is the first edition. I bought it the day it came out. This is the first pressing of the Rolling Stones' Goat's Head Soup. There's the front, there's Keith burning like a match, and inside, of course, you got Bill, Charlie, Mick Taylor, and the inner sleeve, a little torn, because this thing's been in my collection since 1973, and I love Goat's Head Soup. And it drives me crazy because I consider Goat's Head Soup the most underrated Rolling Stones album. Now, of course, Goat's Head Soup was the #1 album and it sold millions of copies, and that's why there's a lot of different Uber versions of it. But even amongst the Rolling Stones themselves, and certainly amongst a lot of fans, Goat's Head Soup is considered a big downswing from what came before it. Of course, you're talking about the classic run, which is 68 Beggar's Banquet, 69 Let It Bleed, 70 I would include with Get Your Yayas Out, 71 Sticky Fingers, 72 Exile on Main Street, 73 Goat's Head Soup. And a lot of people, including the Stones, say, yeah, it just didn't meet up to that level. I don't agree. I think Goat's Head Soup is a pure classic. In fact, it's in my top three. My top three actually goes in order: Sticky Fingers, Exile, and Goat's Head Soup. Although the funny thing is, I've listened to Goat's Head Soup more than Exile. Not that I think it's better, I just play it more often. I never get tired of Goat's Head Soup. I think it's an amazing record. This was the inner sleeve, and as you can see over the years, I bought multiple copies of that on vinyl and then multiple on CD. This was the first one, and you could see all of the pinpricks on the covers because I had this on my bedroom wall. And then other versions, this was also hanging on my wall, and this one's a pretty pristine one from a later version. I actually think this would have been a better cover than the actual cover. I remember when the album came out, here's an ad from 1973. This was a full-page ad from Rolling Stone magazine. And at the very bottom, you can't really see it. There it is. But it says, watch the Rolling Stones perform Angie, Silver Train, and Dancing with Mr. D on Dawn Kirshner's Rock Concert TV show during the week of September 27th to October 6th. See local listings. Then there was a full-page ad, Stones on the Tube. The Coup of the Decade. Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones kick off Dawn Kirshner's Rock Concert, a new television series. Selections from their new album, Goat's Head Soup. Pretty cool. And of course, I have copies of that. And they actually released that in the Uber box as well. So then the second single was this one, Do 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 Heartbreaker, which the flip side was Dancing with Mr. D. So why do I think Goat's Head Soup is so underrated? Well, I'm going to go through it track by track, and I know every damn note on this album because I've heard it so many times. Opening track, Dancing with Mr. D. Now, I think a lot of critics, and maybe the Stones themselves, consider it kind of a disappointing opening track because what do you compare it to? Sympathy for the Devil on Beggar's Banquet, Give Me Shelter, Let It Bleed, Brown Sugar, and Rocks Off from Exile on Main Street. Dancing with Mr. D is not at the level of those tracks, but it's certainly a great definition of what the Rolling Stones sound like and what makes them unique. I usually point Tumbling Dice. Tumbling Dice is a great example of what the Stones sound like and why bar bands and cover bands just don't get the essence of what the Stones, you know. The Stones follow Keith. Charlie's always slightly behind the beat, and oftentimes they sound like they're going to fall apart at any second, but they don't, and then they come together. You never hear that better than Dancing with Mr. D. Check it out. The opening. It takes them a while to get together. You don't know who's following who on the beginning of Dancing. Is Keith following Charlie? Is Charlie following? Are they going to completely just disassemble and fall apart? And then they kick it into the groove of the song. It's a really cool, unique opening for a Rolling Stones album to a really unique track. I love the groove of it. I love the sound of it. It's got this amazingly swampy, to me, New Orleans kind of a feel. It's all that voodoo kind of singing. It's got really cool background effects that you hear better on the digitally remastered versions, which I'm going to talk about. These screams and yelps. The vocals are so buried in the mix, as it is on most of this album, that you don't really hear what Jagger's singing. But I love that. That's my favorite kind of Stone sound. Exile, of course, has that. It's a great opening track, in my opinion. Is it a classic track like the other ones that I mentioned? No. But it's a great opening, unique opening to a really cool record. Then it goes into 100 Years Ago. Billy Preston is all over this album, playing a lot of clavinet and really funky, almost Stevie Wonder-ish kind of influence. And, Stevie Wonder was really big at that time, and I'd opened for the Stones in 73. So it opens up with that wow, went out walking through the woods the other day. Kind of really cool, funky vocal from Jagger. The drums kick in after, and the song builds and builds and builds and builds. And Mick Taylor, and I'll talk about it after as well, but this is Mick Taylor and Mick Jagger's album, I think. And I think that's maybe why Keith doesn't talk about this album so much, or maybe the Stones don't. This is Mick Taylor's shining moment as far as I'm concerned. And he plays a tremendous amount of wah-wah guitar on this, all over the album. And you really hear it on 100 Years Ago. There's a great wah-wah solo. 100 Years Ago is really strange. It builds up, you get a great solo, and then all of a sudden the song kind of stops. And then all of a sudden Jagger starts singing, "Lazy bones ain't got no time to waste away. Lazy bones." And like, what the hell is this? It's like another song tagged on. It's a really strange bridge. One of the strangest bridges I've ever heard in a Stones track. The song may actually be better if they didn't have that part. But then it's okay, because all of a sudden the band kicks back in. Charlie comes, really builds up. Come on. And Mick Taylor grooves in with a great solo, and the song just blitzes away. It's a really cool track. Song number 3, Coming Down Again. A song that I wish Keith Richards would sing. He sings it, of course, on the albums. It's never been done live. I guess he won't sing it because he figures everybody will take a bathroom break, which they probably would, because most people don't know the song. But fuck those people, because Coming Down Again is an amazing, amazing song. It's lush. Again, a lot of wah-wah on their guitar. Beautiful keyboard work from Nicky Hopkins. Keith's voice is really clear and really strong and high in the mix. Great vocals. I think it's amongst his best, certainly his best ballad vocal, I think. A lot of cool lyrics in there. Slip my tongue in someone else's pie. Wow, wow, wow. All these little wah-wah stuff that Mick Taylor's doing in there. Tasting better every time. I could hear all of these songs in my head. It's a lush, it's beautiful. Coming down again. Pump. And then at the end, all of a sudden, as lush as it gets, you get a beautiful saxophone solo, I guess from Bobby Keys. And it just takes the song even higher. Great, classic Keith Richards song track that's never been performed live, Coming Down Again. Then you go into the 4th song, the 2nd single, Heartbreaker, Do-Do-Do-Do-Do. It's got another keyboard intro. Charlie's drums kick in. And then you get the song, Jagger vocals come in. Police in New York City shot a boy right through the heart in a case of mistaken identity. Do. Really upbeat. You get the horn section kicks in. I think it's an all-time classic Stones track. They very rarely have played it live. Even since then, every once in a while they bring it out there, and I'm like, oh, this is great. But for some reason they just don't ever play it. I love Do 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 Heartbreak. It's got a nice little guitar solo in there. That's pretty basic, but it works really, really well. Next up, Angie. I think it's like the most beautiful ballad ever. It was a #1 hit. It deserved it. I think big Stones fans at that time gave it a little grief because it was their debut single from the album and it was a ballad coming after all those classics I mentioned. Who cares, man? It's like the most gorgeous, well-crafted ballad ever. I think it's probably Jagger's greatest vocal performance. It's way up there. It's amazing. It's lush. Strings weave in and out. Nicky Hopkins' piano is just extraordinary. The merging of the strings and the piano going up and down and the beautiful guitar work from Keith and Mick Taylor and Jagger's vocals, the whispering, and there's a little touch on there that makes it super special. Charlie Watts does this little tss throughout the song on this hi-hat, little hi-hat accent. Tss, tss. You'll hear it now that I mentioned it to you. Listen to the song. It's throughout the song. And they just played it the other night over in London. Steve Jordan, man, you got to play that part. He's not playing the part. He's playing it very straight. And that's a key function, little accent to Angie. Steve, if you ever see this video or somebody, tell Steve Jordan, hit that tss, tss, tss. It's missing. Angie, an amazing track with Wild Horses. They're amongst their two greatest ballads for sure. Side 2, kind of like side 1, starts off a little weaker maybe. Silver Train, which to me is the most Exile on Main Street type song. Kind of like a distant cousin in a sense of All Down the Line. Not quite as good as that, not as dynamic. But the funny thing about Silver Train, it's a very basic, chugging kind of a song. Great title because it sounds like a silver train. Silver train is running, and it's got some harp in there, harmonica. Mostly a lot of slide guitar throughout it, which I'm assuming is Mick Taylor. Very much like an Exile type song. Almost Paint by Numbers Stones, but every time at the end of that song I hear it, I'm like, you know, that song is so much better than I think it is. So it's still a really good track. Then it goes into the sleeper song on the album, which is Hide Your Love. Silver Train fades out. You get Mick Jagger playing like a barroom piano. Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down, sometimes I'm fine. Or maybe hide your love. You're like, it's a throwaway kind of a track. Except Exile on Main Street, everybody forgets, is loaded with those kind of tracks. Side 3 of Exile, you know, like I Just Want to See His Face. And then there's other hidden tracks, Turd on the Run. Hide Your Love is just like that. Like you're in a bar with Mick Jagger playing piano. But then all of a sudden, Charlie kicks in and thumps, and Hide Your Love picks up and becomes like a little bit of a bluesy, it's like a bluesy rocker. And it's not such it's like a loose jam, but it's tight, it's raw. You're in a bar with Jagger playing the piano and the Stones, and the song kind of takes off, and it's a great little hidden gem that would not be lost on Exile on Main Street at all, Hide Your Love. Next, the biggest gem on the album. This album is loaded with Angie, 3 of the greatest ballads, Coming Down Again, Angie, and this one, Winter, which opens up, it sounds to me like almost like a 12-string guitar or just a beautifully flanged electric guitar. Beautiful, amazing track. Again, Jagger's vocals are incredible on this album. It's the best singing I think he's done, and yet the vocals are very mixed, low in the mix, which they should be. It's just a beautiful track. Again, swirling piano and orchestration, and I just want to wrap my coat around you. Gonna be alone a winter, and the wind ain't been blowing from the south. It's just beautiful, the highlights and the lilting, and just when you think it ends, it builds back up again. Mick Taylor does a magnificent guitar solo. Carl Olson and Mick Taylor did a cover of it decades later, but there's no beating the Stones version of Winter. Never performed live. I guess they couldn't, but what a magnificent track. Then you get into Can You Hear the Music? Can You Hear the Music is a really interesting track. It's got almost like this Middle Eastern, Arabian kind of a groove. Can you hear the music? Moroccan kind of a groove. And then that's the chorus, and it just drives you in like this groove. But then when it goes into the verses, it switches keys and it opens up, and it just goes, Love is a mystery, can't be mystified, oh no. So the funny thing is, like, the catchiest part of the song is the verses. It opens with the chorus of this tribal kind of Arabian chant groove into these beautiful verses, and then the song is expansive, not commercial. They just do experimental kind of sounds and groove and goes back and forth, and I think it's a magnificent track. Can you hear the music? And then it goes into, besides Angie, probably the most famous track, which is Star Star, aka Starfucker. You couldn't even hear the vocals on the original version because it was mixed so low because it was a band song. But you get the remastered version, I'll show you, and they cleaned it up a lot. Now you can really hear, Jimmy Page was all the rage, giving head to Steve McQueen. Your Trick with Fruit was kind of cute. I bet it keeps your pussy clean. It's about groupies, Starfucker, but it's, your ultimate Chuck Berry, Keith Richard pastiche of Chuck Berry. Great vocals, great lyrics, classic Stones track, and a great way to end what I think is an amazing album. Goat's Head Soup. Lots of different versions of it. Well, I showed you the original vinyl. This is the original CD version that first came out on Rolling Stones record. To me, it sounded just like the vinyl. My favorite version is this one, the Virgin Remaster. This one really pops. These are my favorite versions of all the Stones albums, really. They did a great job. Then they did another version. This was on Universal. This one actually sounds muddy again as well. They went back to like the original mix, but they kept Star Star so you could hear most of the lyrics. What else? Some of the reviews back in the day. Here's a Circus magazine from December 73. And the funny thing is, retrospectively, of course, Exile's the ultimate classic. When Exile came out, it got bad reviews. Even Sticky Fingers, to a certain extent, got bad reviews. And I have the reviews to prove it. But this album actually got pretty damn good reviews. They didn't like the artwork. It doesn't work this time, meaning the artwork, but the music's so good, so who cares? He talks about Hide Your Love with Jagger at the piano, and Angie's like the greatest vocal from Jagger, whispering for the first time, the references, inside jokes. That's on that. And then, which one is this one? This is Circus Magazine. Is Uriah Heep, and a whole big article about the forthcoming Goat's Head Soup and what the Stones looked like back then. Of course, Jagger, that's the 72 tour, what he looked like. And here's a Rolling Stone magazine review that actually is from that time. There's Jagger. That 72 period. But the album also, this is Bud Scoper, a legendary writer, and he talks about how Exile got bad reviews when it first came out. Goat's Head Soup stands as the antithesis of Exile. It would have been suicidal to keep doing what Exile did. Soup is a romantic work with an unmistakable thread of life-affirming pragmatism running through it. It emphasized by the beautiful ballads. The Stones' Soup stands right next to Mott, the thematically similar LP of the Stones' brightest students, as the best album of '73. So Rolling Stone magazine liked it, at least Bud Scopa. There's tons of versions. Here's the Uba Duba Dupa version that came out a couple of years ago of Goat's Head Soup. And then here's Uncut magazine. And they did all the reviews of all the Stones albums. And just to show you this is a modern take on it. But they kind of agree, I guess. Dancing with Mr. D, 4 stars. 100 Years Ago, 4 stars. Coming Down Again, 5. Heartbreaker, 5. Angie, 4. Well, that's wrong. Silver Train, 3. Hide Your Love, 3. Winter, 5. Can You Hit a Music, 4. And Star Star, 5. That's a pretty damn good review. So, why don't the Stones ever play it live? Well, they can't. Without Mick Taylor, there's no way they could play it, and even... they just don't have that delicacy anymore. The only songs from this album that were ever played live, Dancing with Mr. D was played on the 73 tour. They've tried to play it very rarely on occasions now, but it just doesn't they play it straight now, and it doesn't. Dancing with Mr. D on the album just sounds like it's falling apart, and it needs that. 100 Years Ago was only played on the 73 tour. Heartbreaker was played on the 73 tour and occasionally makes appearances. Angie occasionally makes appearances, but it's not a regular. for some reason, and Star Star occasionally as well. Star Star was highlighted at a 75 tour. Angie was played all the time in 75, and Heartbreaker was as well. There you go. There's my opinion on my, I guess, third favorite Rolling Stones album and my second most played Rolling Stones album, and I think the most underrated Stones album. Let me know what your opinion is. Thanks for checking out this video, the Rolling Stones Goat's Head Soup. If you've never heard it, give it a listen. If you're a Stones fan, to me, it's a 5-star ultimate classic. If you've never heard the Stones, this is not one that I would start with because it's a little bit deeper. But check out Angie, Heartbreaker, Winter, Star Star. Oh, fuck it. I love the whole thing. All right. Thanks for tuning in. And if you don't subscribe, please hit subscribe. Please tell your friends. I really appreciate it. And write your comments. I love going back and forth with the viewers. Have a great day.